seated.
Mr. Griffin, you wanted to put something on the record?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. During cross-examination of Mr. Murdaugh, he had testified that in relation to the financial crimes that he had tried to meet with the Attorney General's office, and that on multiple occasions, and that he had, from the get-go, had always been willing to sit down with them. He was specifically talking about the financial investigation and the charges which he received as a result of those investigations. Following up to that questioning, that answer, Mr. Waters then went to Mr. Murdaugh's testimony and the information he provided about being down at the kennel, and he said you had never provided that information to law enforcement and other people until today or yesterday. And Your Honor, that is a direct violation of Doyle v. Ohio, where the Supreme Court said that cross-examining the defendant about his failure to have told an exculpatory story after receiving Miranda warnings at the time of his arrest is a due process violation. The court goes on to say the defendant's post-arrest silence cannot be used against him. Violates due process. And that's exactly what happened on cross-examination. So I want to make clear the grounds for our objection. Also would like to move to strike the question, strike the answer, and get a curative jury instruction that they are not to consider any failure of the defendant to come forward with exculpatory information after his arrest relating to the murder charges. Thank you.
Mr. Waters.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. Clearly, this defendant has given statements on multiple occasions, and that operates as a waiver under Doyle. Additionally, my question was not so limited, as Mr. Griffin says, and it was, in fact, the defendant who made a point of saying that he had repeatedly tried to talk and put that in issue, at which point this was directly responsive to what he brought up. Additionally, this was also, all that was discussed were public statements of his counsel, who was an agent on his behalf and attributable to him. So there's no Doyle violation here. If Mr. Murdaugh had claimed his right to silence from the beginning and had kept that throughout, then the state would be precluded from commenting on the exercise of his right to remain silent. But one thing we know about Mr. Murdaugh is he has not remained silent at any point during this process, and he's the one that brought up this false claim that he had been begging to tell the kennel story when, in fact, he did not do so until yesterday.
Doyle primarily addresses the issue of post-arrest silence. If an accused is silent following an arrest, then it's improper to comment on the post-arrest silence. It does not allow an accused or a person who's suspected to give contradictory information or to voluntarily give a statement or to voluntarily give a misstatement, as has been acknowledged here. I do not find any Doyle violation, and the record is protected. I certainly understand the defense raising any and all possible issues, and they can be raised, and you've done it here. The record is protected, but all motions are denied. Let's bring the jury.
present, sir.
Very good. You may proceed.
May it please the Court, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Murdaugh, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Give that mic up a little bit, please.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
There we go.
When we left off, we were talking about at what point during that interview in the car with Dave Owen that you decided to start lying about the murders of your wife and son. I'm going to pick up this video real quick. Not going to play the whole thing, but I'm going to start from 2 minutes and 9 seconds.
Just start to talk, take your time.
Like when I came back here, I mean, I pulled up and I could see him, and, you know, I knew something was bad. I ran out. I knew it was really bad. My boy over there, I could see it was. And I could see his brain on and I ran over to Maggie, and actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first. You know, I tried to turn him over, and I don't know, I figured it out. His cell phone popped out of his pocket. I started to try to do something with it, thinking maybe, but then I put it back down really quickly. Then I went to my wife, and I mean, I could see.
Did you touch Maggie at all?
I did. I touched them both.
Okay.
I tried to I tried to do it as limited as possible, but I tried to take their pulse on both of them. And, you know, I called 911 pretty much right away, and she was very good. I talked to her. I told her I was going to get off the phone to call some family members. I did that.
What family members did you call?
I called my brother Randy, and I called my brother John, and I tried to call a little boy, a real good friend that's right around the corner from here, but I didn't get him.
What all was around Paul when you walked up?
Blood.
Anything else?
I mean, there was some body things, yes, sir.
I mean, like any other evidence? I know you said the phone fell out of the pocket, but did you see anything else that didn't belong or shouldn't belong or that wasn't part of Paul?
No, sir, not good. No, sir.
How about Maggie?
No, sir.
You didn't see anything around them? What made you come out here tonight?
I went to, my mom's a late stage Alzheimer's patient. My dad's in the hospital. My mom gets anxious when she does. I went to check on them and Maggie. Maggie's a dog lover. Okay. She fools with the dogs. And I knew she'd gone to the kennel. I was at the house.
Just to be clear, you say you hadn't made the conscious decision to start lying about your wife and son's murder right there, correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, let's continue on.
Mr. Waters, I can't tell you exactly when that decision occurred.
Okay. You can't describe to the jury the moment you decided to lie about your wife and son's murder.
I can't tell you exactly when that moment occurred.
I left the house and went.
But you did say earlier that when David Owen asked you about your relationships, that was a trigger point, correct?
Well, that was certainly one of the things that contributed or made me paranoid.
Okay.
Now, you know, there were already things that had gone on that occurred, as I said, that put me in that mindset.
Yeah.
But exactly when I decided to lie about that, I can't tell you.
So the things again you talked about, your dope paranoia, the fact they'd taken GSR, and you talked about the advice of your law partners and Sheriff Hill and Greg Alexander, and then you talked about your distrust of SLED somehow from the circumstances and demeanor of this interview right here, correct?
No, my distrust from SLED didn't arise from this interview. My distrust for SLED arose from a couple of things, and it's really several things. It arose from the way they had been involved in, SLED had been involved in the investigation into Paul's criminal charges, and they had been involved in, there was an issue that had gone on with some rumors about Buster and Paul. They had been involved in that, where, you know, Buster nor Paul had anything to do with what I'm talking about, and SLED never said that, even though they told their lawyer that. They never say that. And there had been another incident where SLED had charged Greg Alexander, my friend in this case. They charged him, and in fact, I thought the agent that was involved in that was David Owen, but the charges against Greg Alexander were so, they were so wrong that my dad and I made a conscious decision, even though he was a career prosecutor, made a decision to go to the courthouse and sit with Greg Alexander while his trial went on, because
This was like 10 years ago, right?
it was a while back,
Yeah.
you know. But
You don't know if Dave Owen was at SLED 10 years ago.
no, I checked on that, because that night the officer who was involved in that case in bringing clearly manufactured charges against Greg Alexander.
So you're saying the night before you sat down for this interview, you were asking somebody about whether or not something about Greg Alexander 10 years ago in the wake of what had occurred?
Oh no, I didn't ask anybody.
Okay, so that wasn't what you were discussing when you were sitting in this car.
No, I wasn't discussing that. I'm just telling you that I thought David Owen was the same agent that was involved in that case. Now, I learned later, because I checked on it, I learned later that it was a different David, SLED agent, first name David with a different last name. I learned that later. I'm just saying that was all part of that process going on in my mind.
So you're saying that you're sitting here right now thinking that this Dave Owen and this circumstances and demeanor of this interview, you're thinking that guy had been involved in the prosecution or investigation of your friend 10 years ago.
I did.
Okay, so here's a new one you just mentioned to us, correct?
No, that's not a new one.
Okay.
That's part of.
I mean, the circumstances are new. I mean,
No,
that's fairly
no.
specific, don't you think?
Well, no, sir.
I mean, the story keeps evolving. Keep going.
No, you asked me about this, Mr. Owen. What I said is part of this whole, I mean, Mr. Waters, the whole part of this whole process involved my distrust for SLED. That was a big part of my distrust for SLED.
Yeah, we can all see it on your face in this interview, can't we?
I don't know.
But you said what you just said a little bit ago, that wasn't the lie, that wasn't the conscious decision yet, so let's keep going.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't believe that it was. I don't
Okay.
know exactly when I made the decision to lie about that.
All right.
All right?
Well, if you see it, let me know, okay? I want to go forward.
To my mom's for just a little while. Tried to call her when I left. Texted her, no response. When I got back to the house obviously nobody was in there, so I figured they're still up here fooling around. Paul was gonna be getting set up to plant. Our sunflower seeds got sprayed and died, and he was refiguring to plant the sunflower seeds. So I came back up here and I drove up and saw and called.
Had Maggie and Paul been arguing over anything?
No.
What was their relationship like?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. How about yours and Maggie's?
Wonderful. I mean, I'm sure we had little things here and there, but we had a wonderful marriage, wonderful relationship.
And yours and Paul's relationship?
As good as it could be.
How old was Paul?
22.
Okay.
So that was the moment, right there, that line of questioning, just asking some very general questions about your relationship. You mentioned that before, didn't you, Mr. Murdaugh? Is that the moment right there? Is that the look on your face when you decide to lie about an important fact in your wife and son's murder?
I don't know, as I said, Mr. Waters, I don't know the exact point that I made that decision.
You specifically earlier mentioned that very exchange as somehow triggering you to lie about the last time you saw them alive.
No, I'm not saying that that's what made me lie. I'm saying this whole set of circumstances caused me to be in a state where I had paranoid thoughts.
Okay.
That normally, Mr. Waters, I could take a deep breath and make go away in a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds at the most. And on this night, I wasn't able to do that. But all of those things that I mentioned, I believe, contributed to that.
Okay. Any more you want to add now, since you keep adding them?
I'd be glad to answer any question you have.
Well, I mean, I'm asking you. I mean, the factors have gone from yesterday to today, and now even after lunch we got some new ones. So anything else you want to add right now as to factors?
Mr. Waters, I don't believe that I've added any new factors. I believe that's what I said yesterday.
All right.
I've explained some of those factors because of your questions, but I don't believe I've added any factors.
Okay. All right, let me move this forward just a little bit.
So, most of this was stuff from between a couple of them, but not.
You had talked about yesterday in great detail about the boat case, which you brought up on the 911 call and to Daniel Green, and then, of course, in this first interview, correct?
I did mention the boat wreck.
All right, and you described that. Do you remember what you said in this interview about the boat wreck?
Not
About
specifically.
specifically the other people involved in the boat wreck? You don't remember specifically? Do you remember specifically? I guess you said no.
I remember talking about the boat wreck, and I
Don't
know
know
that I talked about the boat wreck.
All right. Well, I'm going to play now from 1714.
any direct threats between any of the people on the boat specifically, but I do think there's been a small amount of yip-yap between a couple of them, but not recently.
Okay.
What was the term you used for that? A small amount of yip-yap?
Yeah, and just to be clear, Mr. Waters, there was never, ever a point in time where I thought that the people that were involved in the boat wreck did this to Paul and Maggie.
Okay.
I've never thought that.
All right. I never thought that, but it's literally one of the first things that you said out of the 911 call.
Nah, that's not what I said. I never, ever, ever under any point in time believed that those kids that were riding in that boat or their parents or their families, I didn't believe that any of the families, the people that were involved in the boat wreck had anything to do with hurting Maggie and Paul.
Okay.
But I can tell you that at that time, and as I sit here today, that I believe that boat wreck is the reason why Paul and Maggie were killed.
Okay.
And I'm certain,
So
I believe that.
It was random vigilantes, the 5-2 vigilantes, huh?
Now, what I believe, Mr. Waters, is I believe that when Paul was charged criminally, there were so many leaks, half-truths, half-reports, half-statements, partial information, misrepresentations of Paul that ended up in the media all the time. And when I tell you the social media response that came from that was vile, the things that were said about what they would do to Paul, they were so over the top that nobody would believe anybody would get on social media and do that. But I believe then and I believe today that the wrong person saw and read that.
Okay.
Because I can tell you for a fact that the person or people who did what I saw on June the 7th, they hated Paul Murdaugh and they had anger in their heart. And that is the only reason that somebody could be mad at Paul like that and hate him like that.
Gotcha. All right, so we've got now.
But that's why I did then believe it was the boat wreck, and I believe now that the boat wreck had something to do with it.
All right, so we've got random vigilantes because of the boat wreck.
Now, I don't know that they're random vigilantes.
Well, you just said it wasn't the family or the kid, or the kids or the family of the other kids in the boat, right? So you're saying it's somebody off of social media, and you don't have any evidence of that, do you? You just believe that, and you're just telling that jury that as you try to explain the lie that you told for the first time yesterday. Isn't that right?
No, sir, that's not right.
It's not right. All right, well, let me ask you a question then. So what you're telling this jury is that it's a random vigilante.
That's your
the 12-year-old 5-2 people that just happened to know that Paul and Maggie were both at Moselle on June 7th, that knew that they would be at the kennels alone on June the 7th, that knew that you would not be there, but only between the times of 8:49 and 9:02, that they show up without a weapon, assuming that they're going to find weapons and ammunition there, that they commit this crime during that short time window, and then they travel the same exact route that you do around the same time to Alameda. That's what you're trying to tell this jury?
You got a lot of factors in there, Mr. Waters, all of which I do not agree with, but some of which I do.
All right. You testified earlier that after this happened, well, let me back up just real quick. When you were driving to and from Alameda, why were you in such a hurry? Why are you rolling 70, 80 miles an hour down that dark, beat-up road?
I wasn't in such a hurry.
You weren't?
No, sir.
All right. Show you what's been marked as States 573. See if you recognize this.
I do.
And tell the jury what that is.
It's Mac's car.
All right. And what's it in front of?
The house at Moselle.
And what's between the house and the Mercedes?
The golf cart.
Is that where it was on June the 8th, to your recollection?
No, sir.
Where was it left?
I mean, it was near there, but that's not exactly where it was. No, sir.
Okay, where was it?
Where we would normally park it would be a little bit closer to the sheds. I mean, a little bit closer to the house, to the bushes.
Okay. Your Honor, this.
When was that photograph taken?
Well, do you recognize when it was taken?
No, I don't recognize. No,
You
sir.
wouldn't dispute that it was around the time in the aftermath of the murders, would you?
Aftermath being when?
I'm asking you.
A day, a week, an hour?
I wasn't there, Mr. Murdaugh. Do you recognize those?
I recognize the car, I recognize the house, and I recognize the golf cart. But that is not, that's not exactly how it would have been
All right.
that night.
Can you describe to me then where it would be different?
Well, it would be more in line with, first things first is when we drove the golf cart, or when I drove it for sure, and I believe when the others drove it, you would come in and you would go across the little brick walkway that's in front of this. So if I would have come in and gone this way, or I would have come in and gone this way. This is not a place that any of my family would have normally parked it. And so what I'm assuming is this obviously is taken at daytime. And what I'm assuming is it was taken when SLED came to the earliest it was taken was when SLED came to the house the next day, which I believe the testimony is in the afternoon. And at this point in time, that golf cart, I would assume, would have been moved several times, but that's not how it was.
Well, where did you leave the golf cart when you got out of it around 8:49?
In the manner in which I just talked about.
Okay. Well, help me out again so I understand. You would have come around this way or that way, but where was it? Where would it end up?
It would have been in this picture is facing to the right.
Oh, I got you.
The night that I drove it, I believe I parked it facing to the left.
I understand.
Would be customarily how I did it, and I believe I did it that way that night.
Okay. Well, that's all right.
And that is how I would have gotten into it.
All right. That's a very specific memory. Thank you. All right. At this
Well, that's
time, the
just how it
state would
normally
offer States 573 and evidence.
Admit it without objection.
Could I have the OMA very briefly?
And see, Mr. Waters, you can see in the picture now that you bring this up on the screen, if you look to the right, you can see the actual steps. And just to the left of that would be where the little brick patio starts. So where I would normally park it, you would roll across those bricks, and the end of the golf cart would be just past those. And we all normally parked it that way because the way you charge this golf cart is if you see that back seat that's sitting, you can see the edge. This is a 3-seat golf cart, and you can see the back seat. And a lot of golf carts have the charger that sits on the floor or something. This golf cart has a charger that's plugged in and a part of the golf cart. So you flip that seat up, and it plugs in. And the outlets are right up there by the door.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about that?
I'm going to answer any questions you have, Mr. Waters.
No. Well, I appreciate all that information in great detail.
Judge, you do a comment.
Sustained.
All right.
It's just never parked that way by the family.
Now the computer back, please. What's up? Mr. Murdaugh, I'm going to put up the second interview This would have been June the 10th. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I do want to go through a couple of things with you, okay?
Anything you want to go through, Mr. Waters?
I apologize, got ahead of myself. I want to do one last thing on the first one. For the record, I'm going to start.
I forget the guy's name.
I'm going to start it at 23:55. This is the first interview.
Amy Mae's been having trouble with her. She's been having trouble with her stomach and her tooth. I'm not positive. It was sort of a routine visit, and I can't remember. She told me the name of him, and I can't. I want to say Gordine
Okay.
is who I think she saw.
So was she back home around supper time? Or 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock?
I don't think she got back quite that early. I think she got back a little bit later than that.
Okay. And what did you do today? Were you at the office or?
Nope, I was home. I came home. Paul and I messed around. I was up at the house. I laid down, took a nap on the couch, probably, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes. I got up, I called Maggie, didn't get an answer, and I left to go to my mom's. She had said she might ride with me, but she normally doesn't when I go over there. And I think I texted her.
There, when you repeated the lie that you decided?
Was that the moment that I
Was that the
decided
moment you
that?
decided to lie to mean old Dave Owen?
I don't know, as I told you, Mr. Waters, the exact moment that I decided to lie. But at that point in time,
But you did lie
obviously,
there, correct?
I did.
And she's very good about answering the phone, so that was odd, or calling me back. So that was odd, but it wasn't that big a deal.
All right, I'm going to go to the second interview. It's been previously admitted. Let me ask you this before we start. You stated earlier during your direct testimony that after these crimes happened, you were around family, family was around you, your law partners were around you pretty much every minute after that, correct? Every waking minute. Didn't you say that yesterday?
Yes, they were for a long time.
All right. And this second interview was 3 days later, is that right?
That's correct.
And in no time with any of your close friends and law partners and family do you confess the truth, do you?
No, I did not.
Do you say, hey man, I think I messed up. What should I do about this?
No, I didn't.
You're not telling that lie to anyone, are you? Until yesterday.
Excuse me?
You're not telling that lie to anyone until yesterday, are you?
Not telling what lie? Saying I tried to tell somebody that I was lying?
All right.
On hang up?
So is it. And
All right, I'm going to move this to approximately 24:56.
went to go to the red thing, getting
All right. Correction, I'm at 12:28.
him, he doesn't like to go to doctors, making him go get his blood pressure checked. His feet had swollen up recently.
Wow.
So, that was a big, huge deal.
Okay.
We hung around the house for a little while. I know that Maggie went to the kennels. I don't know exactly where Paul went, but he left the house too.
Okay. How did Maggie get down to the kennels?
I don't know exactly. But on normal occasions, she would drive a buggy, drive a four-wheeler, or very common for her to walk.
Okay. How about Paul?
Paul wasn't much of a walker, but he would use all of the others.
Okay.
But it could be anyway,
Okay.
I don't know exactly. I wish I could help you with that.
So they left and went down to the kennels.
Well, Maggie went to go to the kennels.
Okay. Paul left.
And I'm assuming Paul left
Okay.
because of,
Gotcha.
what happened. I'm assuming Paul
Yeah.
went to the kennels.
Okay. And what did you do once Maggie and Paul left?
I stayed in the house.
Okay.
And I was watching TV, looking at my phone, and I actually fell asleep on the couch.
Okay. And what time did you?
I don't know
wake up?
exactly what time I woke up, but when y'all get my phone, I think one of the first things I did when I got up was call Maggie because I was going to my mom's. And I know I texted her because I checked my phone. And what time did we say the text was, Jim? It's like 9:06.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, I got it written down for you.
I showed you the other night, didn't I?
Yes, sir. I got this.
So, I texted her, so I called her just before that. And, she didn't answer at that point. And I left to go to my mom's.
Okay.
Y'all will just have to look. I'm not sure if I called Paul.
Well,
or not.
and that's why we're getting the phone so we can nail down the times and
Right.
and everything.
Pretty much all of that was lies, wasn't it?
The part about me not being at the kennel was a lie.
Well, also not knowing that Paul went down there, not being sure, that was a lie too, wasn't it? You're putting some detail on this thing, aren't you?
Not knowing when Paul left. Everything about me not going to the kennel was a lie.
And you're able to just do that
Max-
just so easily and so convincingly and so naturally, don't you?
That's not for me to judge.
That's true.
It's an odd story.
Well, I'm going.
Feel right now.
So do y'all have any good clues?
So we're trying to put a rush on that to get an answer quick, and hoping that's going to tell us something.
By evidence, I mean, is it things you think are going to be helpful?
Well, I mean, like the shot shells out there, the casings, the DNA swabs that we took from the door handle to see if anybody touched the door handles, any other places that we think somebody may have touched while they were out there. We're trying to collect DNA from that and analyze that. Which at the conclusion of this, what I'm going to also ask is that we get a buccal swab, the DNA swab from you.
No problem.
Your DNA is going to be there, but we need to eliminate it once it's developed.
We don't need that unknown
yeah.
when it actually is a family member.
There's no problem.
We have talked to close to 100 people trying to track people down, and we're still tracking people down. And that's why, who Paul was with.
I want to tell you one thing while I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Paul was really an incredibly intuitive little dude.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, he was like a little detective. And
He was like a little detective. Is that what you said?
That's what I said. And he was very intuitive, like I said.
And that was what Marion described as Maggie's term for how he was and keeping tabs on your pill usage. Wasn't that correct?
That was what Maggie said about him.
For some reason, you decided to bring that up in this interview, didn't you?
That was a trait of Paul's personality. I think anybody who knew him would tell you how intuitive he was.
Got it.
Going through hours of videos that we.
All right. For the record, I'm at 4630.
Going on collected.
well, thank y'all
Yeah.
very much.
So.
Mr. Alex.
You don't have to call me Miss. You just call me
sorry.
Alex. Thank you for that
Alex,
courtesy.
when you and Paul got back to the house, Miss Maggie's there, and y'all eat supper, which has been prepared, and you said you laid down and took a little nap, and when you got up, Maggie and Paul was gone, or did they leave when you laid down?
I believe that I'm not sure.
But they weren't there when you woke up around the 9 o'clock mark or so when you made the call to Maggie to let her know you were going to
No, nobody was in that house when I left.
So, and just trying to narrow down, the last time that you saw Paul and Maggie is when y'all were eating supper.
Yes, sir.
Nothing.
Your answer was yes, sir. Is that correct?
That's correct.
about to go to the August 2021 interview, but between that June 10th interview and the August interview, you were not working very much. Is that correct? If at all?
No, I definitely wasn't working very much. I think I was working a little bit, but no, not very much at all.
Did you go to Johnny Parker to borrow $250,000 in order to cover the Ferris fees?
I did.
You did?
I did.
Did you tell him what that was for?
No, I did not tell him what that was for.
Did you go to Russell Lafitte at Palmetto State Bank and get $350,000 in order to help cover some of the Ferris fees that you had taken to send to Chris Wilson?
I did.
And did you get those fees before you signed any paperwork or documentation?
I've heard testimony about that in this case, but I can't tell you the specifics of that.
Okay. You don't recall that?
Do I recall when I signed paperwork? No, sir.
You don't recall that you got the money a month before you had to sign any paperwork?
No, sir, I don't recall that.
Call your phone being in the console, which
I'm not disputing that, but I don't recall it.
Did you go to your best friend Chris Wilson and convince him to cover $192,000, the remaining $190,000, in order for him to send that email to your law firm as if those fees had been there all along?
I spoke to Chris Wilson and did not have the full amount of the fees, and I got Chris Wilson to put the remaining fees in his trust account.
And when you did that, you didn't tell him the truth about your life. You just asked him to cover you, correct?
No, I did not tell him.
And he agreed to do that because of his belief of who you really were, or who he thought you were.
He agreed to do that for whatever reasons. I assume that was a big part of it.
And once that $600,000 was transferred, Chris Wilson sent an email to you saying those fees had been there, were in his trust account, correct?
That is correct.
And then you forwarded that email to Lee Cope and Jeannie Seconder, correct?
I know I forwarded it to Jeannie, and I've heard that testimony about forwarding it to Lee Cope, so I believe that's correct.
Okay. Why'd you not get it all from PSD?
Because at that time, there were limitations on how much I could borrow because MAGS was passed. And so I was limited.
Okay.
I couldn't get a loan against Moselle and had to get a loan against Palmetto State. Against Edisto.
Going to the third interview. All right, I'm going to go to 1745. Apparently having some technical difficulties. jury's seen this, so, I mean, again, you repeated the same lies over and over again,
I did.
effortlessly and convincingly.
I don't know about that.
Well, they can see it there.
I agree with that.
Nobody yelled at you.
Nobody yelled at me. Nobody, none of these guys were ever discourteous to me. Like,
Nobody what?
I said, none of those guys were ever discourteous to me. You made a comment earlier that David Owens was mean or something about being mean, and he was never mean to me.
All right. But you decided to lie in part because you distrusted David Owen.
I distrusted SLED in general, and I particularly distrusted who I thought was David Owen at the time,
Okay.
who turned out not to be David Owen.
So, wait a minute. I want to be clear. You're saying now you thought that this was some David Owen that had something to do with Greg Alexander 10 years ago.
No, sir. And I'm not saying that now. I've said that all along.
Uh-huh.
The person that I saw and watched in Greg Alexander's trial that was clear to me was just, it was terrible what they did to Greg Alexander. And the person at SLED who was responsible for that was a guy named David. All right, and I'm not even getting into his last name. I thought that David Owens that night was that guy. Later, down the road, and it was a while, I checked into that and I found out that I was mistaken, that it was not David Owen.
So when we went back and we spent a lot of time going through that first statement, you're telling me now that you were sitting there thinking that this was a completely different guy the whole time, and that was on your mind during that entire interview.
Yes, at the time,
Okay. All right.
I thought that David Owen, no, I didn't think David Owen was a different person. I thought that David Owens was the person that my dad and I had watched. Just, I mean, my dad and I truly thought evidence was
Yeah, you said that
manufactured,
part.
and I thought it was David Owen, and I was wrong about that. But that's what I thought that night.
Any other factors or details you want to add about your decision?
I want to answer any question you have,
No,
Mr.
I mean,
Waters.
let's, any more?
Do you have any more questions, sir?
No, I mean any more about your decision to lie. I mean, I just want to, let's get it all out now. Okay.
If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, sir.
All right, well, I do. Tell me about the replacement blackout. You initially told law enforcement that you weren't sure whether or not there was one, correct? Correct?
Oh, no, sir, you're absolutely wrong about that.
What did you say then?
Shortly after this, it became being told that Paul's gun had been stolen. And the one you heard talk about being stolen from the thing. And I'm not sure how I learned this, but I learned that somebody, I believe SLED had gone to John Bedingfield, who made those guns, and could only find paperwork for 2 blackouts, one of which they were saying was stolen in 17. And that's what they were telling me. And I was certain and told them that I was certain that there was a third one.
But initially, in June 8th and June 10th, or June 10th, you were saying that you thought that y'all had replaced it, and then you kind of wavered and then eventually said you did replace it, correct?
I don't believe that's correct. No,
You
sir.
don't believe that's correct?
No, I don't believe that's
Did you
correct.
say to law enforcement that you thought that the third gun, the replacement blackout, had gone missing in Christmas of 2020?
It did go missing in Christmas of 2020.
So you're telling them that one also had been missing 6 months prior, correct? Answer my question first, and then you can explain. Did you all tell law enforcement that that gun had been missing since Christmas time?
I told law enforcement that when we looked for it at Christmas time, we could not find it.
Okay.
And that was accurate. We looked for it when we were trying to shoot hogs, when we had a group of people out there, and we could not find it.
Okay. But you now know that it was there as late as turkey season.
I know, sir. I know that Will Love and Paw had it right before turkey season, like Will Love testified to.
So it was around, actually.
It was around there at some point in time there, yes, sir.
So you're saying it got stolen a second time, or you just don't know?
No, I'm not.
The 12-year-old stole it a second time?
I never said a 12-year-old stole any gun, Mr.
Sorry, the
Waters.
5'2" people stole it a second time?
I don't know that it was stolen. I just know that when we looked for it at Christmas time, we couldn't find it. And I know this. I know that I hadn't seen that gun in a long time. I've heard the testimony that people who were at my house using guns and hunting with us all the time, Rogan, Buster, they didn't, I can't remember about Buster, but there were several people who didn't even know that gun had been replaced. So that tells me that that gun did not stay where our regular guns were. And I know that I didn't see it there, and that tells me that they didn't see it there.
Of course you didn't see it there, because it's got to be missing, right, Mr. Murdaugh?
Ask that
You got
question
one more
again.
circumstance for your latest story to work, is that it's got to be missing as well. It was when you told law enforcement it was missing at Christmas time. Now we've had testimony at this trial, and now you're still claiming that you never saw it. It must have been kept somewhere else. Where else would it have been kept?
It could have been kept anywhere, Mr. Waters, the way Paul did guns, the way guns were handled around there. I was terrible about that.
You're terrible about that.
I should have been stricter.
But you know that that third gun was fired right outside the gunroom door in turkey season of 2021, correct?
I know that now, based on what Will Lovin said.
And you know it was also fired across the street at y'all's shooting house around that same time, don't you?
No, sir, I don't know that, but I know that I would assume that it was fired at the shooting range, but I don't have any reason to believe it was done in close proximity to that time.
A few months go by, a couple months go by, and you get confronted about your thefts from the law firm, correct?
September of 21.
And unlike June the 7th, when Jeannie confronted you, this time they had unassailable evidence, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, they had,
No wiggling out of this one, correct?
I didn't try to wiggle out of this one.
Well, you've been wiggling before, though, right? You wiggled when you stole your brother's money twice, correct?
Well, I admit almost all of these things, Mr. Waters, but that's one of the things that I take dispute with,
Which one?
that I stole that money that you're referring to.
You're going to dispute that? Let's hear about that then. Tell me why you dispute cashing that check twice.
I don't dispute cashing that check twice.
But you're going to tell this jury that you accidentally didn't realize that you were supposed to be receiving some $125,000 check, or $120,000 check, 2 times. How many $120,000 checks do you receive?
I got that check, and this is several months after. I mean, you can look at my finances, and you can see how I was doing. I didn't balance a checkbook, but the fact of the matter is, when I got that check, I asked about it, and I was told mistakenly that it was for me, that I had participated in that year-end thing, which I did sometimes, not often, but sometimes. Apparently, a new check got cashed. I cashed that check. Then a year later,
Yeah, where did you keep that one for a year?
I don't know where it was. It was obviously in my desk. But, Mr. Waters,
So you found it in your desk.
no, I didn't find it.
Well, you said it was obviously in your desk. So you remember that? You remember finding it in your desk?
No, I remember when we,
Did you go to finance and say, I just found this year-old check? Is this right?
no,
No, you took it to the bank, didn't you?
no, sir, I didn't.
Not allowing Mr. Murdaugh to answer the question.
So when this came up, when this came up, that check got cashed. There's no way that I can have a check in our law firm with the way accounting is, and that I can cash a check twice and think that that's impossible. So to cash a check that's already been checked, it's going to throw. There's no question it's going to throw that off. What happened is we used to get a rent check. We get little checks. I'd have checks, and they'd pile up. The small checks. That check got mixed in, and it got sent to the bank, and it got deposited.
Keep going.
And that was a year after.
Okay.
But I do dispute that I stole that money. That money.
All right. Well, I mean, you brought it up. So any of the other money you dispute stealing?
No, sir, you brought it up. I was just telling you that was the one I disputed.
All right. And you heard Ronnie Crosby and Mark Ball testify about that, correct?
I heard Ronnie and Mark testify about what they thought about it. Yes, sir.
All right. You testified yesterday about the side of the road,
Yeah, yes, sir.
and then you heard the testimony during the state's direct case about what you said on the 911 call. You heard that, didn't you?
I did hear that.
You heard the 911 call where you said you'd been attacked by an unknown assailant and described him?
I did.
And you saw the video from the ambulance where you said you'd been attacked by an unknown assailant and described him?
I did.
And you heard the testimony from Ryan Kelly where you, again, went into detail and described this attack from an unknown assailant?
I did.
And you heard the testimony about your interview on September 6th with law enforcement, in which you went into great detail and again described this unknown assailant?
I did.
And you heard the testimony, and in fact the image was put in about how you sat down with a SLED sketch artist and spent a period of time with her going forward and creating an image of the supposed assailant.
I did sit down with her. I was in the hospital, and they came in, sat down with me, asked me a bunch of questions. I answered their questions, and
Yes, you did. You
it
sat
came
there.
it came up with a composite. Yes, sir.
Sat there and answered their questions just as effortlessly and convincingly as you've been trying to do for the past 2 days. Isn't that correct?
No, sir. That's not true. In that hospital, I mean, I couldn't sit still. I was standing up. I was walking around. I was using the bathroom with the lady sitting right there. I was 2 days into not taking, 3 days into not taking pills like I had been. So, no, it wasn't effortlessly. But, I mean, I told them what I told them. I don't dispute that I lied.
It was all lies, though, is the point, correct?
It was.
I mean, you're saying withdrawals, but you still were able to pull off lies in great detail.
I lied to them.
And the lie that you told of an unknown assailant was to try to make people think that the, quote, real bad guys were back again to finish the job. Isn't that true?
No, sir, that's not true.
That's not the effect that you intended that story to have? Did it have that effect on people that you knew? Isn't that the exact effect that it had?
I don't think there's many people that believe that. No, sir. I know the people that were, the people that were closest to me didn't believe that. So, no,
When
sir.
accountability is at your door, Mr. Murdaugh, bad things happen. Isn't that true?
When accountability is
After
at my
your life-
doorstep,
Go ahead.
bad things happen. What do you mean by bad things?
June 7th happened. September 4th happened.
I don't believe that June the 7th happened because accountability issues were at my doorstep. Now, I do believe in September that I tried to get a man to help me kill myself because issues were at my doorstep.
Every time, or I'm sorry, for the first time in your life of privilege and prominence and wealth, when you were facing accountability, each time suddenly you became a victim and everyone ran to your aid. Isn't that true?
I disagree with that, but what you're
Shame for you is an extraordinary provocation. Isn't that true, Mr. Murdaugh?
Hang on, let me just finish this. You seem to be implying 2 dates, June the 7th and September, in talking about accountability issues. And those, to me, those two things are totally different. There were no accountability issues on my doorstep on June the 7th.
That's what you say.
And in September,
Not what other people say.
I was trying to, well, no, been a lot of people, in September, that wasn't designed to gain me sympathy. That was designed for me not to be here because I didn't want my son to have to deal with the wake of the things that I had done.
But that's not the story you told. The story that came out of your mouth right away was the story of you getting attacked by some unknown assailant while you were trying to change a tire and run flats.
Well,
that's the story that you told.
That is the story I told, but that's because the man who shot me did not shoot me that day as I intended. And I had to have a story as to how I got shot, so I lied.
So you lied. And you're saying that people in your family and your friends didn't instantly believe that whoever these 12-year-old marauders were back to finish the job.
You keep using
and
the
it
term
happened just
12-year-old
2 hours
marauders.
after you'd been confronted by Chris Wilson.
I think probably some people may have thought that when it first happened, but I think like Randy, Ronnie, Mark, those guys, I think they knew very quickly that this was not, I think they knew this was something that I'd done.
Shame for you, I asked this before, but shame for you is an extraordinary provocation, isn't it, Mr. Murdaugh?
Shame for me is an extraordinary provocation. I don't like to be shamed.
The prospect of humiliating the legacy is an extraordinary provocation to you, isn't it, Mr. Murdaugh?
What do you mean by an extraordinary provocation?
It affects you deeply. It's your biggest concern, is it not?
No, that's not my biggest concern.
You're a middle-aged man like me.
I'm 54 years old. I'm not sure. You look like you're in better shape than me, so I don't know.
I was actually a couple of years behind you in law school, but we never knew each other, did we?
I never knew you, no, sir.
Had a very successful career up until this point.
You know,
Simple question.
and the answer to that is no, Mr. Waters. I was an addict for more than 20 years.
All right, so making millions of dollars over a decade is not having a successful career. Is that what you're going to tell the jury?
No, that's not a successful career. When you
Okay, well, let me put it
no,
like this.
hang on. Let me just.
All right,
you
go
put
ahead.
this- you know, it may have been what you perceive as a successful career, but you know, I was the one who was fighting that. You don't have a very high self-esteem when you're an addict. So I don't deem myself a success.
All right. Would you agree that at least outwardly you're perceived as successful?
I made a bunch of money, if that's what you're wanting to get at.
No, I'm actually asking about the perception. You were perceived as a prominent,
I tried to be.
powerful lawyer.
How I was perceived,
president
I
of
don't
the
know.
trial lawyers.
I sure tried to be.
You lived a life of possessing authority.
Possessing authority?
Yeah, we saw the badges. You just admitted of your prominence in the legal community.
I don't think that I lived a life of possessing authority. I never saw myself as that way.
You don't think you lived a life of privilege?
I think I was very privileged.
But as we move to June of 2021, you were suffering from a drug addiction.
Absolutely.
Your father was terminally ill.
When?
As we move to June of 2021,
No, sir.
he was very ill.
He was very ill.
And you were coming to a point of financial crisis.
I was having financial issues like I'd had many times in the past.
Mr. Murdaugh, are you a family annihilator?
A family annihilator? You mean like, did I shoot my wife and my son?
Yes.
No. I would never hurt Maggie Murdaugh. I would never hurt Paul Murdaugh under any circumstances.
Say that.
Excuse me?
You say that, but you lied to Maggie, didn't you?
I did lie to Maggie
You lied to Paul.
sometimes.
You lied to your father.
I'm sure I did at some point.
Did you tell him all the stuff you'd been up to over the years before he died?
No, I didn't tell him.
Did you lie to your brothers?
About financial things,
Yes.
I would have lied to Randy at some point, I'm sure.
Did you lie to him about the last time you saw your wife and son alive?
I did.
Did you lie to their wives?
I'm sure I did.
Did you lie to Marion Proctor?
Yes.
Did you lie to Bart Proctor?
Yes.
Did you lie to the Brandstetters?
Yes.
Did you lie to your best friend Chris Wilson?
Probably.
Did you lie to your other friend Barrett Bulware when you took his money?
No, sir.
No.
I didn't lie like I told you. I didn't lie directly to him. I lied to him by omission, like we talked about. I mean, I didn't talk to him. I didn't see him at that time.
Did you lie to your law partners?
I did.
Did you lie to them about the kennels?
Some of them.
Did you lie to Mark Ball?
Yeah, I believe, based on what Mark said, I believe I did.
Did you lie to Ronnie Crosby?
According to what he said, I believe I did.
Did you lie to Johnny Parker?
I don't believe I ever discussed that with Johnny.
Did you lie to him about the finances when you borrowed that money in July of 2021?
I don't know if I lied to him about. I don't think Johnny asked me. I don't think I had to lie to Johnny about that, so I don't know.
Did you lie? Well, you certainly didn't disclose to him the truth when you borrowed that $250,000, did you?
I did not tell him what I was going to use it for.
I mean, didn't we say before that not telling the whole truth is the same as telling a lie?
Sure it is.
You don't think that's a lie, though?
I'm just saying, Mr. Waters, I'm not taking issue with that, but I don't even know that Johnny and I mean, Johnny had loaned me money numerous times. It wasn't any long sit-down discussion where Johnny wanted to know exactly what I was doing with it. That conversation would have been, I needed it. Johnny was always willing to help me, and that would have been the conversation. So on that specific event, did I lie to him? I don't know.
Yeah, he ended up being out $477,000, didn't he?
He ended up being out a lot of money.
And thank you for your qualifications as to that. Did you lie to Lee Cope?
I don't know. I don't know if Lee Cope was around when I said that or not.
Did you lie to Danny Henderson?
I did lie to Danny.
Did you lie to Jeannie Seconder?
I don't. About finances? Yes, I did.
You didn't ever talk to her about the kennels?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Did you lie to Annette Griswold?
I did.
Did you lie to Christy Gerald, your other secretary or paralegal?
I don't believe she and I discussed. I would have at some point, I'm sure.
Did you lie to Michael Gunn?
I'm sure I did at some point, but I mean, Michael wasn't involved in any of this, so I don't know that any of this ever came up with Michael.
Did you lie to your clients? Did you lie to Pamela Pinckney?
I did.
Natasha Thomas?
I don't know that I dealt with Natasha, but I certainly lied about that.
Hakeem Pinckney?
Again, I don't know that I talked to Hakeem, but I certainly lied about that.
Arthur Badger?
I did.
The Plyler girls?
I'm not sure that I talked specifically to them, but I lied about that.
Dion Martin?
I lied to Dion.
Johnny Bush?
Yes.
Manuel Cristiani?
I didn't have any conversations with him, but I certainly lied about it.
Jamie Risher?
Yes.
Randy Drawdy?
Yes.
Jordan Jinks?
Yes.
Mary Duncan?
Yes.
Adriana Hay?
Yes.
Angel Gary?
Yes.
Christopher Anderson?
Yes.
Elise Mallory?
Yes.
Thomas Moore?
No.
You never lied to him? You just took his money. You never had to actually lie to his face, is what you're saying?
He and I never had a conversation, but I did take that. I did take that money.
Did you lie to Tony Satterfield just a couple of months before June 7th? We saw the text. You want me to get it out?
Just remind me. There's been a lot. Just remind me what it was.
I'll show you what's been marked as 463.
And I don't remember the exact date. So
That was in April of 2021. Is that right? Where you text him and tell him how hard you're working on the case, when in fact you had stolen millions of dollars from him? Tony Satterfield, who got up on the stand and told the jury about that?
I texted him on April 12th, so 5 weeks before June 7th.
Told him everything was okay. You're working hard, right? It's a complex case.
Yeah, I told him I was working on the case.
He was the son of your longtime housekeeper, Gloria.
I'm sorry?
He was the son of your longtime housekeeper, Gloria, who had served your family for many years.
That's correct.
And you stole millions from those boys.
I stole those funds.
And he and his family had started asking questions as we moved to June 7th. Didn't that happen?
No, I mean, there wasn't any rise in them asking questions. No, sir. I mean, he periodically checked in and asked me questions, but, you know, it had come out long before this, I believe, in the Island packet, that there had been a settlement of $500,000. But, I mean, that had been months and months, if I'm not mistaken. And so I didn't notice any uptick in Tony asking questions, and I don't believe that there was any uptick in Tony asking questions before June the 7th.
So you just gratuitously out of the blue decided to lie to him and send that text? Or were there things going on externally that caused you to need to head him off at the pass before further questions started to be asked about money you couldn't pay back at that point in time?
No, I don't think there was anything. I mean, on April 21st, I don't know what external factors you're talking about.
You want to explain that one anymore?
Explain what?
Whatever you want.
I just want to answer your questions, Mr. Waters.
Lied to everyone about the side of the road, that people that came to stop to help, and the ambulance folks, and the 911, and Ryan Kelly, and the composite sketch artist, and all of them, correct?
I lied to a lot of people about that.
You know why people lie, Mr. Murdaugh? Because they know they've done something wrong.
For the most time, I do.
And you've been able to lie quickly and easily and convincingly if you think it'll save your skin for well over a decade. Isn't that true?
I have lied well over a decade.
And you want this jury to believe a story manufactured to fit the evidence that you brought forth just yesterday after hearing this trial's worth of testimony.
No, sir, that's not correct.
Mr. Murdaugh, we went through this for a while, but you remember at the beginning of your testimony, I asked you whether or not you agreed that trying to explain your presence on the kennel video was the most important part of your testimony before this jury. You remember that? And you said, oh, not the most important. I said, was it at least important? You recall that from yesterday?
Yeah, I recall you asking those questions, yes, sir.
And you agree it's important, don't you?
I agree that is an important component. But I think there's a lot of important components.
And you? Testified yesterday and during cross yesterday and cross today. It's kind of evolved on the fact of the factors that led you to decide to lie at some point during that interview with David Owen, correct?
I disagree with that. I don't think those factors have evolved. I mean, you've asked some more specific questions, but those factors are still the same factors. You may have asked questions and gained a little more detail, but those factors haven't changed.
But it was the dope paranoia. It was the fact that the deputy took your GSR. It was the fact that your law partners and Greg Alexander and the sheriff were telling you needed to have a lawyer before you talked to police. It was the factor that you got in the car with Dave Owen and thought he was somebody else from some case 10 years ago, correct?
That believing David Owens was the person involved in the case that I talked about was one of the factors that caused me to distrust SLED.
All right. And then also you said that they started
general.
asking you about, in that first interview, about your relationship with Maggie and Paula. And that's one thing you mentioned as well, correct?
And that was certainly something that contributed to me having paranoid thinking.
Good. For the record, I'm playing the Daniel Green body cam video, 2026.
They are dead on that.
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
Where are you now? All right. Yeah, the police are here now. The police are here now. That's my brother.
Okay. When was the last time you were here with them? Or talked to them or anything like that?
It was earlier tonight. I don't know the exact time, but
Okay.
I left. I was probably gone an hour and a half from my mom's, and I saw them about 45 minutes before that.
That was Sergeant Green, correct?
That was Sergeant Green.
And at that point in time, SLED was not there. No one had gotten GSR from you. Your law partners or Sheriff Hill were not there.
That's correct.
No one had asked you about your relationships. David Owen was not there.
That's correct.
But you still told the same lie. And all those reasons that you just gave this jury about the most important part of your testimony was a lie too. Isn't that true, Mr. Murdaugh?
I disagree with that.
Nothing further.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break now. Please do not discuss the case. You may step down. Please do not discuss the case. We'll take 15 minutes.
All rise. be seated.
You may bring the jury.
So,
All right, thank you. Redirect.
thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Murdaugh, we spent a long time yesterday and a fair amount of time today talking about financial misdeeds.
Yes, sir.
Have you been criminally charged for those financial crimes?
I have been.
And you have pending charges against
I do.
You were asked specifically about $792,000 in Ferris fees that you diverted from the law firm. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And I think you were asked about an accounting or where that money went, and it went out pretty quickly, roughly.
Yes, sir.
And you recall testimony that over $500,000 went to Curtis Eddie Smith.
I do.
And what would that have been for?
That would have all been for pills.
For opioids?
Yes, sir. Specifically, all I was taking at that time was oxycodone and OxyContin.
And you were an addict, were you not?
I am an addict.
You are an addict. And did you repeatedly lie to those you love to cover up your addiction?
I did.
And were you concerned that you would be exposed if you didn't continue to lie about your conduct?
I did.
There's some specific things you were asked about, which I'd like to go over. One thing you had referred to a text message that you'd seen later on between Maggie and Blanca. Do you recall that?
I do.
And it's in the evidence as Defendant's Exhibit 54. And Doug, if you could pull that up, please, sir. And if you could highlight the Blanca text. Is this the text message you're referring to?
It is.
And I'll just read it. It says, T.Y., that's thank you. It says, T.Y., I'm waiting at Dr. Alex wants me to come home. I had to leave door open at Edisto, but trust Mexicans to shut and lock for me. His dad is back in the hospital. The last doctor claims not cancer, it pneumonia. And then she has some faces. Alex is about to die. Hope he doesn't go down there to sleep. Alex needs to take care of himself as well. Is that the text message you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
And did Blanca share this message with you after Maggie was murdered?
Blanca ultimately she shared that with me. She first told me that, you know, Maggie was worried about me, how much she loved me, and that she was worried about me, and had texted her.
Okay. Now, you were asked, you can take it down, Doug. You were asked questions about conversations around the dinner table on the 7th about, well, didn't eat at the table, but around while you were eating dinner about Paul's health. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Alec, I'm going to show you two exhibits, defendants 179 and 180, and ask if you can identify these two.
I can.
And what are they?
It's text from let's see, it's a text from Paul to me on May the 30th.
And then and what's 180? Exhibit 180 behind it.
That's a picture of Paul's feet.
Your Honor, we'd move defendants exhibits 179, 180 into evidence at this time without objection, I believe.
Without objection, Your Honor.
Submitted.
Pull up. Do you have 179? Or we've got to put it. You can let me put it on the Elmo, please. Okay. Alec, do these this text message refer to Paul's feet swelling?
They do.
So if you'll do, you can pull it up. All right, go up a little more so we can read it. And it says from Paul, and that phone number, is that your phone number?
That is. It's my phone number, 1227. My feet swole up. It has something to do with my blood pressure. Get me an appointment as soon as it's convenient.
And what's the date of this?
May the 30th.
2021, right?
Yes, sir.
And if, Doug, if you'll show the picture, I believe this is a blow up of the picture that's in this exhibit 180. Can you pull out? Is that a picture of that Paul had sent you of his feet swelling up?
It is.
Is this what y'all discussed, you know, when you're eating dinner?
Yes.
Okay.
Along with many other times.
You'd also, you were asked questions about your dad's condition and whether he was terminal or not. Do you remember that?
I do remember questions about him.
Okay, and gosh, Doug, I think it's the extended timeline. Is it states 5:30? Is that the right number?
States 5:20, Counsel.
States 5:20. If you'll pull it up, please. It's already in the evidence. And if you'll go to page 14. And if you'll blow up the entry at 142.54 at the bottom of the page. Alex, is this a text that you and we'll, do you recall this is the text that you and other family members received about your father's condition?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and it says, Daddy was just seen by the pulmonologist in Savannah. His opinion is dramatically different from the other doctors. He thinks Daddy has pneumonia and needs to be hospitalized to be treated for pneumonia. He thinks there could be an obstruction, but is more confident that then it is all or mostly pneumonia. Daddy is being admitted to Candler St. Joseph Hospital now. He will have a study done to see whether or not there is an obstruction, and his treatment will be tailored accordingly. Right now, his pulmonologist does not. Go to the next page. Does not believe that he'll be getting radiation treatment, and in fact, the pulmonologist says that the palliative radiation treatment to try to open the airway is a Hail Mary. In his opinion, would most likely not work. Then he goes on to say, if he is right, and this is pneumonia, is much more treatable and can certainly give the immunotherapy a chance to work. Is that what you're referring to? That's the text I was talking about that came when talking to Jeannie Seckinger. Okay. And and this wasn't a terminal diagnosis on the 7th, was it? Not on the 7th. That was actually a little bit of positive news. Okay. It was short-lived, but it was positive at the time. You can take that down for now, Doug. But stay on that exhibit. Alec, you were asking, if you'll go to page 46, please, the same exhibit, 520. Page 46. And if you'll highlight and blow out the 90218, Alex Murdaugh's iPhone shows. Now, Alec, do you remember being asked about these steps, 283 steps traveled during this period of time? I do. And I think you testified your belief was you're just getting ready to leave to go to your mom's house. Is that right? That's correct. I mean, that would have been the time I was right before I left to go there. And you were, looks like you had made some phone calls during this period of time, correct? Yes, the record show. Alec, did you have Maggie's phone with you at any time between 9:02 and 9:06? I didn't have Maggie's phone with me any time that night. And Doug, if you'll go to page 45, please. If you go to the entry at 8:53:15 to 8:55:32. What am I missing? Can you go? You're missing it. Go up one more entry, please. The one that records steps, please. And then take it all the way to the bottom, Doug. Thank you. This is in evidence, and this is Agent Rudowski's timeline, and it says Maggie Murdaugh's phone, iPhone shows 59 steps traveled between 8:53:15 and 8:55:32. Were you walking with Maggie Murdaugh's phone during that period of time? I wasn't walking with Maggie's phone any time that night. And if you'll look at Agent Rudowski's entries, is there entry of her phone showing steps during any time between 9:02 and 9:06? Do you see any on this page from 8:53 to 8:55? No, sir. If you'll turn to the next page, page 46. Going down to your steps, is there any recording of phone steps, phone recording steps, according to the data we now have for Maggie's phone at any point in time up to 9:02?
No, sir.
And had you repeatedly asked SLED to get the data from the OnStar, from the cell phones, to evaluate whether your phone and Maggie's phone were ever moving at the same time? You made that multiple requests.
I repeatedly asked David Owens about that information.
And when you asked that question, were you aware that Maggie's phone had been located, down the road, half a mile or more? Is that right?
Yeah, I knew where her phone had been located.
And why was it important to you to get that information?
Because I knew that whoever had done this to them had Maggie's phone. And I knew that my phone and Maggie's phone and my car were never together. At any point in time.
Sure. Now, you have given inaccurate times in many statements to law enforcement in this case, have you not?
I did.
And we reviewed some of those in your direct examination. One was Paul getting to Moselle around 5 p.m. Do you remember that?
I do.
Were you lying to Agent Owens or anybody when you said Paul got there at 5 p.m.?
No, I wasn't lying to him. I thought that at the time.
And when you...
most of the times or a lot of the times when I gave times, I qualified them and say, but, you can look at this. I pointed them to my office, to the call log, to the key card like we talked about, or my phone, or my OnStar.
And when you told the agents that you thought you got to the office 8:30, 9 o'clock on that morning of June 7th, well, you were wrong, right?
I was wrong.
Were you lying?
No, I wasn't lying.
Okay. And when Deputy Green drove up and you had your first encounter with him, I believe you told him that you had been gone to your mom's house for an hour and a half. Is that right? We just heard it.
The last one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hour and a half. I think that is what I told him.
Hour and a half. And that the last time you saw Maggie and Paul was 45 minutes before that.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And when you spoke to Agent Green, Deputy Green, it was about, I think the records show they didn't arrive on the scene until 10:22 or something like that. Is that right?
That sounds right. I think that's what the records show. That sounds right.
And that were you lying to Deputy Green when you told him what time, how long you thought you'd been at your mother's and the last time you saw Maggie and Paul?
No, sir. I wasn't lying to him.
Were you trying to mislead him in any way?
No, sir. Not when Mr. Green got there.
Now, you've admitted in the first few questions that I asked you yesterday and multiple times today that you lied to Agent Owen and Deputy Rutland and Agent Owen and Agent Croft, and on a couple occasions about your whereabouts following dinner, correct?
I did lie to them, as we discussed repeatedly.
And you've explained that it was this addiction, opioid-induced paranoia you just couldn't shake. Is that right?
That's right. Like I said, there's certain things, anything, that make you paranoid, but I could get over it really quickly. But that night, I didn't.
And you had a bag of pills in your pocket, did you not?
I did.
And When you got down to the kennels, we're not going to repeat all that, but I mean, did you ever see anybody down there, anybody else?
No, there was nobody. There wasn't anybody down there when I was there.
And did you believe that the information, whether you were there or not there, would advance their investigation in any way?
No, I didn't. I didn't think that.
And why didn't you think that?
Because they were fine and doing good when I left there.
Did on the 911 call, do you remember that the call first went to Hampton?
I don't remember that, but I know that now.
And what we played here in the court in your testimony was the Colleton County handoff. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
Okay.
I think at some point the part in Hampton might have gotten played too, didn't it? But I know the main part was the Colleton part. But it was like a minute into the call.
But initially it went to Hampton, then subsequently it was transferred to Colleton.
That's right.
And then a minute or so into the Colleton call, you said, "I've been up to it now." You remember that?
I do remember saying that. I remember hearing it. I don't remember saying that, but I remember hearing it.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, that is accurate. And by up to it, at that point, I had gone all the way up to them at that point. When I first got out, I was close, but I wasn't right at them, I don't think.
Right. You were asked about the roadside shooting, and your intent was to end your life that day, was it not?
It was, no question.
And you were shot but not killed, and then you made up a lie to law enforcement about what happened, right?
That's correct.
Were you trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith by doing that?
Was I trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know exactly. It all had to come together so quick. I don't know that I was trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith.
Okay.
I may have been, but it was just, you know, I wasn't supposed to be there. And then I was.
When you say I wasn't supposed to be there, what do you mean by that?
I intended for him to, I mean, I intended to be gone. I intended for him to shoot me, and I intended to be gone. And the one thing, my main concern at that point was that I did not want Buster knowing that I had tried to do that.
Okay.
That was my motivation in telling that story.
I see. Did you eventually voluntarily convey to Agent Kelly and others that was a fabrication?
I did. After, I don't know, a few days in detox, when I finally got over those initial, just where I could function, I think I told you first, then I think I told Buster, then I think I told Randy and John, and y'all arranged either the next day or 2 days later to come, and we called Ryan Kelly.
Alex, you've lied to your family over many years, have you not?
I lied to my family about my addiction.
And you hid from them you were stealing client money, did you not?
Oh, I never, they didn't know anything about that.
And you've lied to your law partners about financial dealings and perhaps your addiction?
Yes.
And you've lied to law enforcement about not going down to the kennels after dinner, but eating dinner and taking a nap. Did you not?
I did.
Alec, did you murder Maggie?
I would never hurt Maggie.
Did you murder Paul?
I would never hurt Paul. If I was under the pressure that they're talking about here, I can promise you I would hurt myself before I would hurt one of them. Without a doubt.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Orders.
May it please the court. You said that you were concerned when you talked to David Owen about the bag of pills in your pocket, correct?
I mean, no, sir, I'm not saying that I was concerned about that. I don't think I told you I was concerned about that. I'm just telling you that was a fact. I had a bag of pills in my pocket, and that was one of the things, that was one of the many things that came together that night.
And you're trying to tell this jury that as a reasonable husband and father in this situation, concern about a bag of pills in your pocket was more important to you than telling law enforcement and narrowing the time when you last saw your wife and son alive. That's what you want to convince this jury of?
No, sir, because, I mean, the bag of pills in my pocket was not what I was concerned about sitting in there. It was, as I said, it was one of the many things that was going on. But I wasn't sitting there worried about those pills in my pocket.
You were asked about requesting the phone and automobile data, and that was because as a prosecutor and a lawyer, you had been manufacturing an alibi to cover your tracks.
No, sir, that's absolutely wrong.
You admit you were wrong about a lot of things in what you told law enforcement about June 7th, correct?
I was wrong about things. Some things.
You were asked whether or not you voluntarily confessed to Agent Kelly, but you only did so after being confronted with undeniable information, correct?
No, sir, that's not correct at all. What I was told is that, and I believe this came from Randy, what I was told is that SLED had come up with some information that seemed like it was consistent with my story, and they needed me to verify some things, is what they told me. And, you know, I knew that resources had already been wasted. I didn't want them wasting any more resources, and I told them the truth, but there wasn't any, nobody had presented me with any evidence.
And you just testified that you told Jim Griffin first, correct?
I believe that I told Jim Griffin first.
But at that time, you didn't say anything about those kennels, did you?
To Jim Griffin at that
Correct.
time? No, sir, I didn't.
When you testified on direct yesterday, and you were asked about leaving the kennels with your new story in light of the evidence that's been presented in this trial. Your words were, "I got out of there," correct?
I believe that's what I said, yes, sir.
And you also said during your testimony on cross-examination that you hurt the ones you love the most, didn't you?
I did say that.
Thank you. Nothing further.
In saying that, Mr. Waters, I just want to explain that answer. I mean, he just asked me a question about what I said, and then I was going to explain why I said it.
All right.
As I told you earlier, you're implying to this jury and to me that was me talking about hurting Maggie and Paul. And that's not what that was. What that was is me saying, I know I hurt my brother, my partners, my clients, many of whom I told you I loved, all of whom I cared for. And that's what that was when I'm talking about how my misdeeds, how I hurt the people worst were the ones I loved the most.
I just asked you what you said, correct, Mr. Murdaugh?
You did ask me what I said, but in asking me that, you're putting an implication on there that I am explaining.
I just asked you what you said.
Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Step down. I'll stand for a moment while counsel approach. Well, we've come to the end of this week, and we will adjourn now and resume at 9:30 Monday morning. Have a great weekend. Do not discuss the case or allow yourself to be exposed to any information concerning the case. And we'll see you Monday morning. Have a great weekend. Jury is excused. Everyone be seated, please. Regarding scheduling, first up Monday morning, Mr. Harpootlian.
Your Honor, we anticipate having 4 witnesses on Monday. They would probably average an hour apiece. So I would suspect by lunchtime we would be, no?
Early afternoon.
Early afternoon, I'm told by Mr. Griffin, resting our case. And of course, Mr. Waters indicated he'll have one or two reply witnesses.
A couple right now, Your Honor. Obviously, we need to assess that when they complete their case, but it would not be lengthy.
So that begs the question, what day next week do we do argument and charge?
Well, it's all unpredictable. As we can see from today, it's pretty unpredictable.
I'm guessing. I'd hope Tuesday. I don't think that's going to be, if they have any reply witnesses. Wednesday would be more of a target. I'm just saying a target date that we can begin thinking about in terms of argument and charge. To that end, are you going to set a time limit on arguments, or are you going to just let us do whatever we want?
I do not set time limits on argument.
With that in mind, Mr. Griffin and I mean, they get two arguments. We perhaps would like to split our final argument, which would, we think, with 4 weeks of testimony in there, it's going to be difficult for one person to digest all of that. There's no problem with that, is there?
Your Honor, I would object to that. I think Your Honor's rules and general practices consistent with one counsel handling argument.
Your Honor, I've seen it done both ways, and 4 weeks of testimony, I think it's very difficult for one person, and we only get one argument.
I've never done it, and I'm not inclined to do it. I'll look it over and consider it, but I'm not inclined to allow the defense to split closing arguments.
We would agree to a 2-hour limit. Does that maybe incentivize to look at this?
We'll look at it. I'm not inclined to do it. It's unprecedented, as far as I know, in the state of South Carolina, except perhaps where you've been able to convince someone to the contrary.
I've actually objected to it when I was on his side of the courtroom.
Well, we have some days to think about that. Regarding closing arguments, I think we emailed you all a few days ago concerning any requested charge or charges that you might have.
Yes, sir. We'll get those to you this weekend, if that's acceptable.
We'll try to do that, Your Honor, but we're preparing witnesses. How about Monday night?
That's fine.
Okay.
Anything else before we adjourn?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Nothing from the defense, Your Honor.
Okay, 4:49. We are adjourning for the weekend.